All right, so I'm a musician, so I won't touch anything else other than my own papers.
You better not.
Oh, you know, the 8 o'clock and 9:30 were much more friendly. Good morning, everyone. Nice. Good morning. My name is Craig Talmadge. Yeah, sure, there's a doctor in front and maybe a PhD at the end if I feel real fancy. But please just call me Craig. I've worked in campus ministry for a number of years, and I left that to finish my PhD at Arizona State. The main reason I like being called Dr. Talmadge, I love Dr. Craig, is because anytime I hear the words Dr. Talmadge, usually it's a student that wants something from me, and they're like in trouble, like they didn't turn in that assignment, or like, Dr. Talmadge, it's like, well, what do you want? So, yes, please just do call me Craig. I also, you're allowed to call me Dr. Craigle. It's probably my favorite name because the Trevan family, their children call me Dr. Craigle, because if you've seen the Lego movie, there's the Craggle, the crazy glue, but it kind of, anyways, they love calling me that, so. But anyway, so I was introduced to Pastor Sarah through the Trevans, and we struck up a conversation about some research I do on associations, and I'll share that a little bit more with you in a bit. Sarah invited me to come out and talk to you about what is community as you are starting the Sticky Faith series. And I tell you, hearing that gospel for the third time today, I get more out of it every time. And so I will share some reflections on research and use the story of the prodigal son as a metaphor to fuel a discussion, well, a presentation, if you will, on what is community. But to begin, will you pray with me? Gracious God, you know, first two services I said I hadn't preached in a while. Well, now I preached twice, and it's so far so good. So thank you, God. But please, just thank you. I just want to say thank you for this community. This community is amazing. I've met some wonderful people, and I can see the vibe here is great. Just be with us today as we listen to your word and as we sing and we worship you. And let your words flow through me this morning. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, so I am a community development researcher and practitioner. So I was used to like having a mic. I'm like punk rock star, like with a microphone. Now I'm Britney Spears. So I'm getting used to it. So if I'm talking with my hands, I apologize. What is community? If you're going to do development and research, you should know what community is, especially if that's your field. All right, community. I'm going to go back to the early roots. Thank you, etymology.com. Go back to the early French and Latin roots of community. Now, I won't actually pronounce the words in French or Latin because I'm going to spare the French people my slaughtering of their language. I'll give you one Latin word that I actually can say. But if we look at the French roots, specifically in the 14th century, that revolved around community, who makes up a community is a fellowship, which is a very churchy word. You probably hear fellowship a lot. At least I grew up Lutheran. My father's a Lutheran minister. We said we had a fellowship hall. That's where we gathered. To be in fellowship is to be a group of people who gather. But really, if you look more at the word, it's not just a group of people who get together. It's a group of friends. The word community means friends, a fellowship of friends. What do? They gather. To see what makes a community of high quality, going into some Latin roots here, is to have a community that gathers together but shares. Whether it be sharing of stories, whether it be sharing of needs, whether it be sharing of resources. A community who gathers, a fellowship of friends who gathers together to share things. Additionally, to be a community, and I stand by this one very strongly, to be a community, you must be public. Now, it means that anyone who is interested and represents the same commonality, which is what community means, commonality as well, should be welcome, should be included. So to be high quality, it needs to be a fellowship of friends who gather together and share, but they do so publicly. How do you know if you have the right amount of people in your community? If you actually look at the root of the word, it means many, all, but really what it means is everybody. So who should be included in community in this fellowship of friends who gathers and shares? Publicly. Everybody. Now, my professional work is mostly on what I call voluntary associations. In fact, I'm not the only one who calls it that. Plenty of other people in the research do that as well. Voluntary associations are associations people join because they volunteer. They do so by choice. And these associations aim to mirror, represent, and serve the needs of their local communities or their respective communities. These people who gather together can include associations like churches, can include neighborhood associations, can also include professional associations, also trade unions and other things. Depending on where you live in Phoenix, like I do, living up in the area of Ranch Glendale, I do not necessarily consider my homeowners association a voluntary association. They do get the dues, but and then they write me nice little notes about why I shouldn't park my car on the street. So, but it leaks oil, it's just whatever. Anyways, today's parable actually, to take a little switch here, it really represents God's call to us in associating together. God's called to us in churches to actually become more inclusive and other-serving. By nature, associations have a tendency to become exclusive, to become self-serving. It's just how they work. Even though we might have the goals to be more inclusive or be more other-focused. And so we need to work on that, and we hear that in God's call. Some thoughts and some strategies that I will share with you from the message and from current research on how do we live out that call. This parable of, I like to call it the lost and found son. I don't really like the word prodigal, but it is, growing up Lutheran, that's definitely the word I heard. What we hear is today, this is the third of 3 parables in Luke 15. You might hear, this is the third of the lost and found parables. Does anyone remember, you might remember the one about the lost sheep. The shepherd had 100 sheep, then one got away. And he left the other 99. Oh, what is he doing? He left the other 99. Oh, it must be a mess when he got back. The guy's going to be finding sheep all day. But it's a very great story. The second one, which I really can relate to, is the woman who loses her coin. She lost a coin, and she's thrashing up her house and trying to find this coin. I lose stuff all the time. It's an organized mess, remember. It's an organized mess. But I lose stuff all the time. But she finds it, and what does she do? She throws a party. All right, this is the third one. This story, these stories, these 3 lost and found parables are often interpreted as lessons regarding repentance, which in many ways has been interpreted to mean turn around or turn back to God, and also God's unending love for us. It's a beautiful story these are beautiful stories about God seeking out us. That might be the message you hear in most congregations you go to whenever this passage is read. Now, that message is beautiful and wonderful, and we're going to keep it where it is. But today I'm adding on to and offering a complementary message about why community is important and how that is discussed and found in this parable. Now, as you've often heard, Jesus likes to start off parables. He doesn't start off these ones, but he also often starts off parables like, the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of God is like. Does that sort of resonate with some of you? All right. A lot of times, when I hear those words, it makes me think, wow, heaven sounds awesome. Or, it sounds confusing, Jesus. I didn't understand that parable. But, in many ways, perhaps when Jesus starts out a story like the kingdom of heaven is like, or tells us a parable like today, perhaps he is sharing with us some lessons for how do we create and sustain communities like churches in society today. Today I offer a message that reflects on the 3 characters shared by Jesus in this parable. The youngest son, the oldest son, and the father, and what they teach us about community today. So, let's start out with the youngest son. The youngest son desires to be free of his father, his family. He's just tired of it. He's fed up. He says, give me my money, I gotta go. It's time to go. He wants to be free of his father. So the father gives him his money, and he leaves. He seeks out a new adventure without his father, without his family. And in fact, he goes to a distant land. He's so far removed from his community. And what happens is he loses everything and realizes he wants to come home. All right, so I used to work in campus ministry, and whenever this passage was read, everyone fixated on the prostitutes. Yes, let's be edgy. All right. So just, like you read a little earlier, it said he blew it on a wild life. No judgment, have no idea what he did. Some passages say dissolute. Definitely wasteful. But do we know if he bought prostitutes? No. The older brother is literally trying to demean his brother by accusing him of that. So let's not misinterpret and judge the youngest son, all right? Well, let's not go too far. He was just a little wild. So what happens? Well, he loses all his money on his wild life and returns home to his father and repents. I don't know about you, but I get the feeling that when we talk about how we recruit and interact with others in the church, I feel like the youngest son is often, as a metaphor, is often talked about the most as the focus of the church. We think about it as these folks who are lost. They're not in our doors. They have left. In fact, if you look at the trends, according to Pew Research, which is a very good research firm, over the past 7 years, we've seen a rapidly growing number of Americans who are now unaffiliated with religion. In 2007, the number was 37%. Today, it's 56%. Now, the question becomes, are people becoming atheists and agnostic? Not necessarily. It appears that the majority of people just sort of feel like, what religion are you? Well, nothing in particular. Is it irrelevant? Is it not meaningful? And I'll talk about that in a moment. An additional more scary statistic for me, as a person of Christian heritage, is that the younger generation is actually much more likely to be unaffiliated than any of our generations before us. Why are more and more leaving? Some would say it's a crisis of faith, it's a crisis of morality. I'm going to tell you right now, my guess, if I could throw a bet on this, which you probably shouldn't bet on religion, but if I could throw a bet on this, I'm going to call it a crisis of community. There's a famous sociologist, his name is Robert Putnam. He wrote a book called Bowling Alone, which talked about the erosion of social capital, the erosion of the social fabric, those things that connect us to each other, whether they were social clubs to different bowling leagues he uses. He wrote a book called Bowling Alone. But those things that used to tie us together, neighborhood associations, parties, all those things, they're kind of going away. And even with all our devices and technology, we may appear to be less connected than ever. Does that mean it's hopeless? Well, if you read Putnam's books, you might start feeling like it's hopeless. He's kind of a downer. So I have other books to recommend you if you need them. But he's kind of right. In fact, if you look at another recent Pew Research poll, only 28% of Americans know at least one of their neighbors' names. Only just over a quarter of Americans know at least one of their neighbors' names. Almost 75%, 72% do not know a single neighbor's name. That's right. Not for me, it keeps me in business. I study neighborhoods. I got work to do. Now, one of the things about this erosion of social fabric, I want to make sure there's no misnomers about it, is that this is not an erosion of the moral fabric of America. You might hear some news reports and people talking about, people aren't connected anymore, they're not going to church because all these younger people, they're just so immoral. Where are you getting that from? Some of the more evangelical nature might say, we need to go out and save and reform these individuals. That's one thing, but perhaps they haven't left because of morality. Perhaps they've left because they think that churches have lost their relevance. Perhaps they've left because they misinterpret churches today, or maybe perhaps accurately interpret some, as not to be inclusive or caring about others. For those unaffiliated, they are now seeking out different adventures with different communities, with different loved ones and friends that are not inside churches. But for churches who are now struggling with faith formation and drawing in these individuals, I'm not thinking it's the youngest unaffiliated problem. I think in some ways, we may as churches have what's called the oldest son problem. So let's turn to the oldest son. The oldest son is kind of an afterthought in this story. By the way, you're halfway through the message, so congrats for staying awake. I'll keep you updated. The oldest son sort of after that. Jesus tells these first two parables about the lost sheep, and then he tells about the lost coin. And then what happens is, he tells the story about the parable of the lost son, but he goes, wait, I got a couple extra things I probably forgot in those first two parables. That's what I think Jesus wrote about. But I could totally be wrong. I wasn't there. But the oldest son appears to be a very important anecdote that must be included. The oldest son, he hears this party going on, says to the servant, hey, what's going on? What's all this noise? Maybe he said, that fattened calf smells real good. And he goes, your brother's home. And they're having a party. And what happens? He gets angry. He gets angry and refuses to go to his own brother's party. Then his father sees that his son is not there. So he goes outside and pleads with him. I don't know, you wouldn't have to plead with me to get me to a party. I'd be there. I'd be first in line for that fatted calf, I'm telling you. But what does the son do? He gets bitter and jealous. He says, listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you. I've never disobeyed your command, yet you have never even given me a young goat so I might celebrate with my friends. So I'm trying to figure out an accurate sort of metaphor of this, but I think that comparison, analogy. I think that now the oldest son has kind of become the youngest son. Like, I had a sister, I still have her. I lost her. No, like she's wandering somewhere. No, she's good. She's good. So my sister was definitely younger child syndrome, which is not a real thing, and I study psychology, so it's not a real thing. It might be a little bit of both. Whenever I got a present for my birthday, like I'd have all these birthday presents, Megan always got one. Because, she had to open presents with me, because it's just like too much to watch a sibling open presents. I'm feeling like that's what's going on with this oldest son. He's like, listen, you give him the freaking calf, and I can't even have a goat? It's quite whiny, in my opinion. But anyways, I actually think the oldest son has a lot to teach us about ourselves. The oldest son, I think, represents what's called the exasperation of the church. I do a lot of consulting for churches, and I feel like a lot of the church leaders and members I'm working with are just tired. They're exhausted. They're so tired. They very much sort of reflect the oldest son, and I mean that in a way that actually the leaders and volunteers I often work with, not in this church, of course not, they can't understand why individuals wouldn't want to come to church. They're just like dumbfounded. Like, why would anyone want to come here? Look, it's awesome. They also, especially some of the leaders I've worked with who have been in the same positions for a long time in a church, is that they think they have worked so hard to serve others in their different roles that they've served in the church. And don't get me wrong, they totally have. But they don't understand why anyone would ever want to be involved. Look how much I've done. The thing is, are we serving ourselves or are we serving others? We have to put aside this exhaustion, this spinning of our wheels, just sort of keeping ourselves going, and we need to actually go outside our doors and run to others, like the Father. Now, if you didn't catch on earlier, the Father represents God. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. Then I had a gal who asked me the last service, who represents Jesus? I said, Jesus is the one telling the story. He's Morgan Freeman in this one. Let's turn to that Father. All right, so the Father's like not the main point of the story, but he's like totally the main point. Right, so you hear the story, and it's really about the youngest son, then transitions to the oldest son, and the Father's sort of sprinkled throughout. Sprinkled throughout. So, he's got this youngest son that comes to him. By the way, you're 2/3 of the way done. His youngest son that comes to him and says, give me my money. And the father doesn't really sound like it was a contentious debate. He just sort of freely gave. And he actually lets his son go. I can't imagine, as a dad, how hard that would be. I can't imagine. Basically, when the father says, and I didn't mention this in the early service, but when the father says, give me my share of the property, give me my money, he's actually literally saying to his father, I wish you were dead, because I want my money. Isn't that dark? How strong and loving of a father does it take to just give him what he think he deserves and lets him go? So the father sort of disappears from the story for a while. We hear about the young son's wild life. And then the father is out in a distance, sees his son, and what is the first thing he does? If I was that father, I don't know. I'm not a father, and I don't know what my feelings would be in such a situation. I I think I'd be worried or bitter. I would have a lot of conflicting feelings about this son who just basically said to me, I wish he were dead. But his first instinct as a father is he runs to his son. He throws his arms around him, he hugs him, embraces him, and he kisses him. Now, if that's supposed to represent the community we're supposed to create in church, don't recommend going around kissing everyone. So be careful with that. Boundaries, people. But runs to him, hugs him, embraces him, and kisses him. And then what does he do next? He holds a party, holds a celebration. He says, quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us even celebrate, for this son of mine who was dead is alive again. He was lost and is found. But father's not off the hook. Man, this father works hard. So at a party, spending a bunch of money, and then what happens is his one son won't even come to the party. He goes to the oldest son and gives his oldest son a lesson on inclusion. He says, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. As we wrap up this message, I want to share with you that I truly think in this parable, the father is the one holding the keys to building community. Remember those definitions of community? If I were to define community today, I would say it's everybody gathering together and sharing with each other for the good of the public, for the good of all, for the good of everybody. The question that we wrestle with in associations, whether they be churches, nonprofits, different nonprofits, or neighbor associations, or even professional associations, but really in churches, I think what we're really wrestling with is the question is, how do we reach everybody? It's not ads on television, it's not handing out brochures, and it's almost not door-to-door knocking. I'm going to share with you some lessons I took from this story, as well as some research-based approaches that may help as you move forward in this sticky faith. The first and foremost of any sort of connection with another person, especially drawing them into a community, is that we need to respect the self-expression of others, even if we disagree. That means political expression. That means haircut. If you don't like someone's haircut. You know, I tell my students, that means like if someone likes country and you don't like country, then you keep your darn trap shut. Alright? You let them listen to country and you ask them, taking it to step 2, you need to show genuine interest in the expressions of it. I'm not a big country fan, mostly because when I'm in rush hour traffic on the I-10 and country comes on, I get angry for some reason. Country's open road music. So is classic rock to a degree. It's just furious. So, but whenever someone says, I say, well, what do you like about country? Who's your favorite artist? Small things like that show respect for the self-expression of others goes such a long way. Here's the thing, and we don't really talk about this a lot, but there's this term in psychology called individuation. Because I see myself as a unique individual in this community. In this group, I am special and recognized, and I can contribute. I have something to offer. When you don't have that feeling, it's called de-individuation. If you've ever felt lost in the crowd, it's a very terrible feeling. What we've seen is de-individuation leads to really bad problems. One of them in groups is that you've lost a voice. You've now decreased your ability to be innovative and creative. Additionally, you may drive that person away. And third, if that person is forced to stay, they might even develop depression. It's a very dangerous thing. I have a phrase that said the oppression of self-expression is one of the most worst things that has happened to our society. We need to allow people to express themselves and in a safe place. So we need to create safe places for people to explore their own faith and spirituality and express themselves. Why does the youngest son have to leave? Why couldn't the youngest son fight it out with his father? Why couldn't the youngest son stay in the community and discover what he needed? Additionally, when we talk about creating safe places, one of the ways that we can do that is by honoring the unique expressions of others. We need to party more. I'm not even kidding. We gotta throw in more celebrations. Okay, be careful though. Potlucks outside in the summer with potato salad, recipe for disaster. As a pastor's kid, I spent a decent amount of time in the Parks and Recreation bathroom. So please, no potato salad when it's 100 degrees in the sun. We need to celebrate more. Maybe a little less potato salad with eggs and mayonnaise, but we need to celebrate more. And what we really need to celebrate is not just like getting together. It's always great to celebrate getting together. What we need to celebrate is the gifts in the community, the diverse perspectives. So if you're an artist, let's celebrate artists. If you're a young person, let's celebrate the youth, and let's celebrate the kids. Let's celebrate more. Did you know that recognition, being recognized in somewhat of a public way, some people are kind of weird about that, which is fine, but being recognized for your, whether it be privately or publicly, is one of the longest lasting feelings. It just feels so good for such a long time. We need to do that. I'm almost done. We also need to be willing to give our best to outsiders. Now, I am a Lutheran. Born and raised Lutheran. What does that mean? I don't know. The churches I used to go to, there was assigned seats, but there weren't any names on the seats. But those were assigned. You did not sit in Jim and Nancy's seats. We need to be willing to give that. I used to give my mom a hard time about that. She'd be like, she's like, we're sitting in the back. That's our spot. I was like, our spot, Mom? Did you hear Dad's sermon last week? We got to be willing to give our best to the outsiders, those who are not a part of us yet. They deserve it. In fact, in my own teaching, I have learned that the students in my classes deserve my full attention. So many times at the end of class, I realized in my first 2 years teaching is that I would just be typing on the computer, putting in grades when they're like walking out. That's not fair to them. When they come talk to me, they deserve my full attention. From now on, I don't even do that. Even if I end class early, computer goes aside, I wait and see if they need anything. Because every person deserves your full attention. We have to ask ourselves as well, what are we spending our money on, and what are we spending our time doing? A lot of times I find in any sort of association, but churches in particular, is that we often spend money on sustaining ourselves instead of reaching out to others in our community, in the larger community. We have to ask ourselves, time and money, is it for ourselves or is it for others? And then finally, to wrap up, we really need to keep our older brother selves in check. We have to continue to invite new people into our community. We cannot be self-focused or jealous or bitter or angry. We've got to put that aside. We also need to continue to create friendships inside and outside of the community. One of the things that happens with a lot of churches is that it's like you have your church time on Sunday and then you die. Like, okay, got my church. We have this joke, my sister and I, it's in poor taste, about a certain mega church in town where we have a lot of friends that go there, where they just go and show up and then like get their communion and listen to the music, listen to the messages, and go home. It's like 3 p.m. or something on a Saturday. And my sister and I are like, oh, you gonna go catch the matinee today? It's in poor taste. But mega churches, for many reasons, have small groups. There are other ways to connect, but we don't want to do that in community. Community is not a consumer-minded idea. It's a fellowship of friends together, gathering to share, not to consume. Not all mega churches like that, so please don't take it that way. Many churches are doing great things. But what that means is we have to be willing to talk to people inside this own space and say, hey, you want to go to lunch today? Or hey, you want to come over for board game night on Tuesday? Or hi, I'd love to cook you dinner. We need to be willing to build community outside of these walls. Because an hour, and probably taking a little more, hour 10 on Sunday is not working. It's not working anywhere. So we got to be better. Finally, we must continue to volunteer and participate. If we don't have leaders, we're lost. We have to show up. We have to lead and be involved. But we need to do so with a mindset of we're serving others. Too often, I've seen many people get burnt out, and I've seen a lot of churches kind of flare out because their leaders are only serving there to raise their own statuses. You don't get to be the cookie person for 10 years. I'm sorry, it's not working anymore. Go teach someone how to make cookies. You don't get to, in the University of Lutheran Church where I worked at, For a long time, we had what was called the men's bake-off, where the men would bake food. Buyer beware. And then we would auction off the food, and then the proceeds would go to charity. We had one person who did that for years. And they never mentored anyone, so when they stepped away from it, we were kind of at a loss. It almost didn't happen. You can't be that person. We have to be willing to groom and raise and turn over. And we have to be willing to serve, not for us to look good ourselves, like, oh, cool, I'm the juice box guy. I don't know where that came from. Darcy, I guess. But we got to be willing to do it to serve others. So, to conclude, I want to encourage you all, as you begin this new Sticky Faith series, to reread this parable and think about it. Think about the father. Think about the youngest son. Think about the oldest son. Keep your oldest son in check. Remember the feelings and what the youngest son is looking for. And run like the Father. Amen.